Hello, gorgeous faces.
Hey, everybody.
It's going to take a while. We've got a lot of people coming. Okay, so you guys know the drill. This is Scott Brick, in case you've never heard of him. Haha. Everyone knows Scott Brick. We all love Scott Brick, and we're going to put him under the spotlight today. Please, you guys, you know the rules. If you have a question, type in big caps question, or I'm going to assume that you're chatting about like your dog and your cat and your kids. Type question. I'll ask Scott when there's a break in the conversation. And then rule number 2, very, very important rule, quirky questions only. If you want to know the ins and outs of narrating male voices and what's your favorite genre, I guarantee type Scott Brick's name in on the internet and you'll find the answer, or go to any other Facebook group. But if you want to know what his favorite color socks are, ask away. Okay, it's nice to see you guys. There are still some people trying to come in. Hopefully we will catch them soon. I've been dying to talk to Scott, mostly because, okay, well, I've got weird reasons, because I've heard an inside source, our guest from the Tuesday call, said, ask Scott about old Hollywood. He's a font of wisdom. And that's a fascinating subject. And also because Johnny Heller said you would be the best guest since sliced bread. And hold on. Okay, I think we're getting people in. And so, Scott, I heard about you going, I did a little research. We had a few technical glitches. And during that time I did my research, you can tell I spent hours researching.
Everybody, the technical glitches were on my side. I am a Luddite. I had to reboot like 6 times. So I'm sorry to keep you all waiting.
They're fine. These guys have been through Zoom bombings, and they all we just connected. They came back on, and nobody even blinked. And then we had one Zoom bomber put porn on, and we had like 20 narrators. It's like, choose your audience. Nobody cared. They just kept talking. So they're fine.
Oh my God.
So Scott,
that's marvelous. Yes.
First, you're from near me, except you're from the gorgeous part that I like to pretend I was from Fresno. You're from Santa Barbara.
I was born in Santa Barbara.
Yes.
Lived there until I was 9. We actually lived in Los Angeles when I was born in Santa Barbara. So it's hard to know, my mom's obstetrician was in Santa Barbara. So it's
when you think of home, what do you think of? LA, Santa Barbara?
I think of LA. I think of LA. And yet, Johnny Heller and I were doing an event coming up in Solvang early next year.
Oh, and I think, gorgeous.
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And I think when we, Suzanne, my girlfriend, Suzanne Elise Freeman, also audiobook narrator.
I'm hoping if you love this call, you'll maybe convince her to come on one.
Oh, she'll come on.
I'm too scared to ask her because totally. I'm kind of in awe of Suzanne.
Oh gosh. Oh, that's so lovely. But she and I were driving home from an event space that we were looking at. We were searching for an event space for the thing that Johnny and I are doing, and we and Maps, the app just led us through Solvang, and we looked at it, and I hadn't been there since I was a kid in Santa Barbara, when my parents would take us there like once a month. I used to beg my parents to take me to Solvang, like most kids beg their parents to take them to Disneyland. And as we drove through it, I went,
it's special, isn't it? There's something in the air like when you drive in.
Yes. And it felt like home. Even though I view Los Angeles as my home because that's where I've lived most of my life. Nevertheless, you realize I'm from here, Plus, I had a Christmas store, a year-round Christmas store, and that's always going to be home to me.
Yeah,
Christmas is my love language.
yeah. That's that's so funny. It's so funny to meet someone that's had kind of the similar, except for the Fresno part, background. So, but
hey, I spent a lot of time at Fresno. Some of my favorite comic book stores were in Fresno.
So, oh, really?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, when you're
Alpha
in
Omega
Fresno, you kind
Comics.
of can't wait to get out. When you're growing up there, the day you turn 18, you either move to San Francisco or LA.
Yeah. I lived in Porterville, which is about an hour and a half away. And people always say, what's the best thing to do when you're in Porterville? I said,
Go to
leave,
Fresno.
leave, go to Visalia.
But
Either
I'm
that
not
or go
putting it
down.
down because when you get older, you like now I think Fresno's the coolest thing on earth because when you get older,
Well,
you
it's interesting. I was baptized. I'm not Catholic. I was baptized Catholic, and raised Catholic. I haven't really been part of that church in many, many years. I'm Christian, but I don't consider myself a Catholic. And yet, as people get older, they will go back to the Catholic Church because of the ritual,
yes.
which really is just another word for nostalgia.
But what I want to hear about is the time you went to Broadway with your teacher. Was that like, and I'm not
Okay.
so, yes, I get the life forming, oh my God, I want to be a narrator, but as in life moments.
I was 17 years old. I was a senior in high school. I had skipped a year, so I was a year younger than everybody else. Um, it was Christmas 1982, a couple of days after Christmas, right before New Year's of 1983. And
I mean, could it be even more perfect?
uh,
Add Christmas.
I, tell me, right? First time I'd ever been to New York, and our theater teacher, Mike Frimm, I really miss him. I miss him. He died of AIDS complications almost 20 years ago, and
But one good teacher can change your life.
he truly did.
Yeah.
Because I was brand new at this high school. I had transferred. My mom got a new job, and so I had to change schools my senior year. And I was in Huntington Beach, about an hour south from where I am now. And this guy, Mike, he just saw something in me that I did not see in myself. He had faith in me as an actor in a way that I'd never. I wasn't intending to be an actor. I was intending to work in the comic book field. I saw myself as becoming a comic book artist, and he insisted, even though he had only known me for like less than a month. He goes, "You need to go to New York. You need to go." And I said, "I can't afford to go. It was going to be $1,000, and my parents had been divorced,
Yeah.
and I was like, I don't have that kind of money." He met with my parents individually, and then he met with them mutually. And I was like, you get my parents in the same room with one another after a divorce, you got my respect. And he assured them that the best thing for me was to go to New York. And I kept wondering, who the fuck is this guy doing this? Pardon my French, I cuss. I was like,
I mean, and it's a different world these days. These days it'd be like,
totally.
yeah.
Right. And I was like, why are you pushing so hard? And the next thing I know, there was one day we saw the previous year's Tony winner, which was Nine, the musical by Maury Yeston and Arthur Kopit, directed by Tommy Tune. That had won the Tony Award the year before. Raul Julia played the lead role. Contini, Guido Contini. In the evening, we went and saw Cats, which had just opened, which had Betty Buckley, singing, Grisabella singing Memory, Betty Buckley, who used to appear at the end of my street,
This is like the field trip of all field trips.
Of course, Betty Buckley was used to be at the end of my street in the 8 is Enough house back in the 70s. And I'm like, this is crazy. And during Cats, during the intermission, at least on Broadway, I don't know how it was during the touring versions, but they would invite you up on the stage. You were allowed to come up on the stage and you could look around. And I've never seen that before or since in a Broadway show.
Yeah.
But my teacher, Mike, he just nudges me with his elbow and says, "Come here, come with me." And he takes me up there and he walks me down stage center and faces me out towards the audience. And he puts his right arm around my right shoulder. And with his left arm, he does this big, grand, sweeping gesture towards the audience. And he says, "This is why I pushed you to come here." because this is the perspective from which you need to look at the world, not from the audience looking on stage, but from the stage looking at the audience. This is where you belong.
Wow.
And I still wanted to be a comic book artist.
Yeah.
And yet
You
I
can still do
knew
that too.
yeah, sure. You know,
Yeah.
there's still time, but I knew I had to trust that, you know, perspective is something that we don't always get. Sometimes we have to trust other people. And instantly my life changed. And I swear to God, I have never picked up a pencil since then, not to draw. I've never drawn again. Never,
know what I
ever,
was just
ever.
thinking?
I became an actor from that moment on.
You know what you said about, who is this guy? And you know what we said about these days? If somebody had done that, we'd look at it through a different filter. And, you would, because we look, but I'm wondering how many of us opportunities come up. And as adults, because a life-changing opportunity doesn't have to happen when you're 16 years old. But I wonder how many of them, we look at them with jaded eyes because it's a scary world or whatever, and how many things we miss.
I
Change of
remember
perspective.
about 10 years later, I told this story. And a woman who heard me tell this story says, "Was he gay?" And I said, "What?" She said, "Was he gay? Was he
And
hitting on you?" Yes, he was, but who fucking cares? I
how
was
long
like,
ago was that, though?
Oh, though that was 20 years ago when somebody asked me this. And I remember thinking, how dare you be so jaded
Yeah,
that that's what you take away from that story.
and
The takeaway from this story
yeah.
is that somebody is willing to insert themselves in such a positive way into somebody else's life to help them.
Kindness. There was good
Yes,
in the world.
exactly.
And
I was like,
but on the other hand, what you just said there, when I'm talking about this world, I'm sitting here going, horrible, that the first thing we would think is he's up to nefarious things.
well,
but
I've been telling this story for 30 years. She's the only person who ever said that. And I'm
the
grateful
fact that
for
I
that.
don't think she would say that, I would hope she wouldn't say that now, because in a way it's a better world now, in that that's not even a thing, really. In a way, at least we're not that bad. But I do think maybe we could be more innocent.
I hope so too. And I think
Yeah.
that you have to have a certain amount of innocence to be able to accept the fact that, okay, this moment is potentially life-changing. Are you innocent, willing enough to say, yes, I'll take it? And I'll tell you, after, I really do miss him. He was a lovely man. And every single time since his death, every single time I have worked on stage, and I haven't worked on stage for about 10 years. It's hard, when you're narrating. But every single performance, I would walk into the theater before the house opened, and I would walk to the end of the stage, and I looked out at the audience and I said, "Mike, I'm still here. Thank you."
But you know what you gave to him? You were his life. You and whoever else he touched, because I'm sure it wasn't just you, were his life work. You were what made it worth I mean, that is priceless.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
I hope so.
That's brilliant. See, I think sometimes, and that's what I love about this. That's what I love about this job. The fact that we're working with publishers. Publishers aren't like hard. I worked in business. Publishers aren't that. I get that they're business. I get that people can think the
It's
worst.
a business, of course. Sure,
but the people that were drawn to publishing were not drawn to working for an oil company. They were drawn to publishing in a large part because they wanted to do it. I know people, the editors and publishers, they're doing audiobooks. I won't say their name in case I don't want people to know, because we have something in common. The pursuit of dreams, and then the writers you work with, bravest human beings. I mean, they face their demons every single day.
Right.
And what an honor. And I think we get caught up in the marketing and the promo and wow. I mean, we're living with people that somebody's going to be writing about in future generations.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? But you're one of those people. You're a voice. I remember that you did Harlan Coben, and I'm a bit of a sucker for those. But you're one of those voices that I had health problems before I did audiobooks. Well, not health problems. I had a brain tumor, and it made me blind for like half a year.
Jesus.
But
Oh my gosh,
but
I'm so sorry.
oh no, it was the best thing ever happened in my life. Life changing. Happy ending. I mean, you're allowed to,
A
when you have
good third
dramatic
act.
moments, you get a happy ending. You know, it could have gone the other way. It teaches you lessons, it makes you brave, but it also
I
made
had,
me an audiobook narrator,
yeah,
you know, but
I had cancer 9 years ago, and it
it
taught
changes
me,
you, doesn't it?
yeah, it taught me perspective. It gave me
Yeah.
perspective that I didn't have before.
And you wouldn't go back, because if you went back, you wouldn't be who you are now.
Yeah, no, I remember speaking to my girlfriend at the time. I had only heard the news 20 minutes before, and I was in my car when I got the news from my doctor, and I was parked outside my house, and I walked inside, and I told Tess, and I said, okay, here's the thing. I have cancer, which is, the sentence you just never imagine yourself saying, as I'm sure it must have been the same for you. But I remember saying, this isn't a tragedy. This is an inconvenience.
Yeah.
It's, I knew that fortunately, mine was non-aggressive. And so I was able to glean those lessons from it.
Yeah. And see, that's mine was benign. I wasn't as graceful as you. I think I vaguely said something like, you're absolutely wrong. You're not doing your job properly. I demand a second opinion. So I wasn't exactly that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, you narrating a Harlan Coben book, that was around the time,
Mm.
Those books that I listened to took my mind off things when I needed my mind taken off of things. We were saying the other night I was a bit shocked by the amount of people that had looked at my YouTube channel with like demos. You don't think of people listening. I mean, for me, with my piddly amount of audiobooks, you've been doing this for 100 years. The amount of
Well, I look
voices
like
you
I have.
think about the amount of people that you've talked to sleep or talked to during bad times, or been there for.
For many years, people would say to me, especially when it was a woman who would say to me, I just want you to know that I listen to your voice every night as I'm falling asleep. And it's awkward when you hear that. And so what I would typically say is, well, I have that effect on women. But I learned not to do that anymore, because what it's essentially doing is, I think, denigrating what they have so courageously shared with you. The learning how to accept a compliment is one of the most important lessons I've ever learned in my life. You could be like, oh, no. But what you're telling them is their opinion doesn't matter.
Yeah, they're giving you a gift and you're throwing it. It's like, oh, you look beautiful on that. Oh, this old thing. You're throwing it in their face.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And so now when somebody tells me that, it depends on whether Suzanne is around. It's happened in front of her. And I said, just a woman said, she was, God, she must have been 75, 80 years old. And she said, I just want you to know, you are the only man I've ever taken to my bed other than my husband. And I said, I appreciate the fact that you said that. This is my girlfriend, and I'm sure she can appreciate it as well. I tell you what, I had a woman get in touch with me through my website, and she told me that she had been in an abusive relationship. Her husband was a cop. She saw no way out, and it took her years to get out of it and years to recover after she got out of it. And she said that she had become subject to panic attacks, debilitating panic attacks, where she couldn't move, where she tried desperately to hug herself and convince herself it would be okay. And she said, I don't know what it is, But when I discovered audiobooks, I found out that, a panic attack that would ordinarily take me 3 hours to get through would only take me an hour. And I don't know what it is about your audiobooks, but I can listen to you and be okay in about 20 minutes.
I know
And
what
she
it
said,
is. I know what it is. It's and Johnny Heller and Sean and what we're all supposed to be striving to do. And it's the hardest thing is you take yourself out, you tell the story completely. So you leave them alone with the story and the
right.
characters, and
Yeah.
you aren't in the room. And
I
and
think,
I mean that as the major compliment. You're so in the moment
no,
and in the story,
I'm right there with you. But I think
you
it's
know.
also, it's the fact that I always tell people, be confident in the way that you tell a story, because people
Oh,
don't need to know where they're going as long as they feel your confidence.
safe.
It's safe. Exactly. It's like a
Yeah.
handshake. Nobody wants the dead fish handshake, right? Nobody
Yeah.
wants the over, break my knuckles. One guy trying to show
I
up another
love
guy,
that.
you know, it's a strong, confident handshake. That's
I
all it
love
is.
that.
And if you hear that in the narrator, then okay, you trust them. And I think, hell, it might just be the timbre of my voice. I don't know.
I love
But
the
I
confidence.
remember,
I love the confident thing though. That's because you can
I
keep that in
just
your mind when I
I
love
just
that.
remember when I lived in the apartment where I lived before buying my house. Um, this woman, Amy, sorry, April. April, she lived in the apartment below me, and she was subject to panic attacks. And she had a boyfriend named Herb. And when things went wrong, Herb would come over and he would wrap her in his arms and just hug her, and she could settle down. And I remember one night Herb was out of town, and she came up, and she's suddenly on my doorstep in this like really skimpy robe, and I'm like, what's going on here? And she's shaking. She's shaking. Her whole body is shaking, and she says, I'm having a panic attack. Can you help me? And she said, I heard you. I lived right above her, so she could hear
Yeah.
me. I was walking around upstairs. And she said, could you come downstairs? Could you help me? I said, sure. And so I went downstairs, and she had this, chaise longue, and she laid down. I laid down next to her, and I just put my arm around her. And there was nothing romantic about this.
It's just human touch.
I was seeing somebody, she was seeing somebody. She just desperately needed help.
Because they think they're going to die.
Yes.
They
And
literally think they're going to die when they're having panic
look, I've had a
attacks.
panic attack once in my life. It was miserable.
I've
And
heard
I
this.
just remember feeling privileged to be there for her. And when this woman got in touch and said that she could listen to my voice and get through in about 20 minutes, I just started crying. I was weeping because I remembered the feeling of April shaking in my arms. It's a
But
it's a it's a it's a privilege getting to do
it's a
what we do.
massive why. I mean, they say that, okay, not that I listen to too many diet podcasts, but they say that you can't just have one why. The trick is to have a lot of whys, because then if the one why fails you, you keep going back to. So there's so many things you can love about the job, but then you've got that underpinning everything. How
Mm.
can you not do that once you know you can do that? You know, it's okay. Now I am conscious that I can keep you talking for years, and don't even get me started about the Eight is Enough house. So
Okay.
I want to throw a few of their questions in.
I have a question for you. So
Yes.
you said somebody told you earlier this week that I could wax rhapsodic about Hollywood history.
Oh,
I'm
yes.
assuming that was Stephen J. Cohen.
Yes. Yes.
Yes,
He said it 6 or 7
I
times,
can.
actually.
I can. Matter of fact, I was at I went to Hollywood Forever Cemetery just a few weeks ago
Oh,
with one of my dearest friends, Michael Tuppy. And he and I both adore the silent film era of Hollywood. And
oh,
there's
because we went to Valentino's house,
yes,
and I lived in
Valentino is
Hancock Park. We used to go stalk all the old houses. Okay, sorry, go ahead. I digress. Go ahead.
Valentino is buried at, we went to his the mausoleum
Oh,
at Hollywood Forever.
and you can still
And
feel it in the air, can't you?
you
There's the
totally can.
line between the past and the present is gone in LA. I don't care what happens.
It's a half a mile from Paramount Studios. I mean,
Yeah.
Jesus, it's just, it's gorgeous. It is lush, it is rich. And both of us unbeknownst to each other, before we went and we met, we were meeting at the cemetery, and then we were going to Musso and Frank, the oldest restaurant in Los
Is it
Angeles.
still open? I heard it was
Oh yeah.
closing.
Well, no, it's not closing.
Okay,
No,
okay.
it closed during the pandemic, of course,
Oh,
but
okay.
it's there. We've been there 5-6 times since it reopened. But I said to Michael, his partner Stephen, and then Suzanne and I, all four of us were going to get together, and I said, if we're going to go into deep Hollywood, I want to go to Hollywood Cemetery, the Hollywood Forever Cemetery. I had never been. And
You'd never
unbeknownst
been.
I had never been before, but unbeknownst to either one of us, we both stopped off at a local supermarket and grabbed a couple of dozen roses just so we could drop off roses at silent film actors' graves. And
I miss LA. I miss that about LA. I miss knowing you're and you feel it. It's the closest thing to time travel you can get. Even Culver City with Laurel and Hardy and the studios.
Oliver Hardy died a mile and a half from my house. He was living with his sister at the time. He died very close to me. One of the graves that we went to was a woman named Florence Lawrence. She was the world's first movie star. Movie star. The first woman to have her name in the credits of a film. First man or a woman. She was known as the Biograph Girl because she was in every movie the Biograph company made around 1910, 1914.
I might have to look her up.
Yeah, and then her contract came up for renewal. And Carl Laemmle, who is the scion of the Laemmle movie theater chain here in Los Angeles, he was a founder of Universal Studios, and he said, "Sign with me, and I will make you the most famous woman in the world." She said, "I am the most famous in the world." He said, "No, the Biograph Girl is the most famous woman in the world. Sign with me, Florence Lawrence will be the most famous woman in the world."
CBS Studios is gone, isn't it? We used to live across the street from CBS Studios.
Yeah.
Gone. I think it would break my heart going back but I still think it would be this. Is it still the same though? Do you still feel?
It is. It is. When we were at the cemetery, we found her grave. I looked it up. I got GPS to guide me right there. And we literally stumbled. We tripped over Burt Reynolds' grave on our way there. And I was like, what? Burt Reynolds? First movie star in the world, and Burt Reynolds, who died like 2 years ago? I'm like, oh my God. And we just dropped flowers at all of them. And then we had dinner at Musso's, and you can absolutely feel Hollywood history when you walk around this place.
Yeah.
That's why I keep living here.
Things you never forget. I mean, just things, and I mean that, and the stupid things, the smell of the air driving down Wilshire Boulevard at night. I don't know why, but there's just something like the whole, I think LA, do you know what it is? I think for actors, LA is a dream. And I moved there when I was 18, and that's LA is like, this big glamorous chance at excitement and following in the footsteps of the greats, and James Dean. I mean, they were all there.
It's a lovely thing. Yeah.
And I think most narrators have that in common.
I think so. Storytellers? Oh, totally.
Yeah,
totally. So what are some of the questions that people have been sending you? Okay. I'm sorry. I've been monopolizing the conversation.
Well, you're the guest. You're supposed to monopolize the conversation. We're here to hear your story. Okay, so we've got quirky questions. Mike Carnes says, Scott, do you have a vice that is maybe counterproductive to audiobook narration? He asks with a cigar sticking out of his mouth.
Oh, there you are. There you are. I love a good stick every now and again, man. I tell you what. Yes. Well, there's a couple. People have wondered, Kate Mazer and Suzanne have asked me for years, how the fuck can you have a grilled cheese sandwich for lunch and be able to go back to narrating? Because apparently there's this fallacy that you can't have dairy and keep narrating. I've spoken to voice experts, and they say that there's no truth to it. Nevertheless, that is something that all right, well, I just saw Stacey Carolan, if I'm getting that name right. There you are. I just saw him doing this. I've spoken to vocal experts and they say that's bullshit.
Yeah, I've heard
But
that's not a thing either.
right. However, we just, okay, so hang on. We just recorded all of the Raymond Chandler Philip Marlowe
Oh,
books,
wow.
right?
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Another audiobook narrator who's also a director, Richard Brewer, a dear friend of mine. He knows so much. He knows everything about the mystery genre. He used to manage the mystery bookstore in Westwood, just south of UCLA. And when they asked me, when the estate chose me, who to narrate these 8 books, they said, "Who do you want to work with?" And I said, "Richard. It's got to be Richard."
How was it
And
narrating it? Was it amazing?
oh
Was
my
it
God. Oh
fabulous?
my God. I mean, come on. A dialogue as lush as can be. Marlowe's in a bar across the street from his apartment. It's just open. There's nobody in it. He's talking to the bartender, and there's one other guy in the bar, and he's down at the end, and he's drunk out of his mind. And the guy asks for another one. The bartender's like, "I don't know if I should give him another one." Marlowe's like, "Well, it's not your liver. Why wouldn't you?" And he says, "In the first place, I don't like drunks. And in the second place, I don't like drunks getting drunk in my place. And in the third place, I didn't like him in the first place." And I'm like, I can't believe I'm getting paid to say this out loud, right?
And also, and you feel like you're part of the world, don't you, when you're narrating a book like that?
Totally.
Like the
Totally.
whole time you're narrating it, like your whole, like that time
Right.
of your life, you remember that book.
Well, what we did, because Marlowe was a hard drinking son of a so-and-so. And I mean, there were so many scenes where he was like, I was sticking it out, and I walked back to my jalopy, and I pulled out the pint of rye, and I downed a couple of quick shots while I was waiting for him to get out, and so I could follow him. And on the last session of the last day of each book, we poured a little bourbon. And that's the kind of, you're talking about a vice. I wouldn't have been able to go much further than that if we'd started early in the day. But it felt right. It felt right. And in the last book that we did was actually out of order. We did The Long Goodbye. And in The Long Goodbye, Marlowe is suffering from depression. I mean, if you read between the lines, the character is clinically depressed. And his friend has died, and he's trying to make sense of it. And he starts off the first 50 pages of the book talking about how he met the guy. And a number of times he would say to his friend, "Hey, you want to go to Musso's? Let's go drink our lunch." Well, come to find out that Raymond Chandler wrote that Philip Marlowe novel in a booth at Musso and Frank. And when Richard and I said, we got to go to Musso's and celebrate, recording these 8 books, as we're getting escorted to our table, the maitre d' says, "You'll love this table. This is the Raymond Chandler table."
It was meant, did you mention
and
it
I
to
said,
him?
What? No, I hadn't said a word. Suzanne had gone up and said, we're here for our reservation. And the woman said, "Oh, this is our best booth.
It was
this is the
meant
Raymond Chandler booth." And I
the
said,
stars
"That's
aligned.
not possible. We are here tonight to celebrate Raymond Chandler."
That's
and
the
she
art
said,
gods.
"He used to sit here in this booth and
That's
write."
the art gods. That is my theory, because I grew up with like artistic weird parents. I believe that real art creates itself, chooses the circumstances, and we're just lucky enough if we land in it. That's the art gods.
Amen.
They wanted
amen.
it done. They got it done. I love that. Everything aligned.
Yeah.
I love that. It's not as often, but I think it's okay. Now we've got more questions. Don Barnes, do you record mostly at home now, self-directed, or do you still go into studios most of the time? And how much direction these days? And what direction do you predict? I don't understand the last bit of that.
Well, maybe as life goes back to normal, how much direction do you think there would be?
Oh, okay, yeah.
I'm assuming that's what you mean, Don. Okay, I see you giving me these. Um, until lockdown happened, and I'm high risk, so I have, even though some studios have opened, I just can't take the
Not worth
risk.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have diabetes, I had cancer. It's like, okay, well, I'm just gonna I hate working from home. I'll be honest with you.
Oh,
I
see,
don't
I love it.
even though my commute is 30 seconds, just walking downstairs, even still, this industry is better when it's collaborative.
Yeah.
And there's only a handful of studios that still provide directors for you, but
Yeah.
every single time it's available, even now in lockdown, I insist on it. And we do it like this. We do it via Zoom, you know.
Yeah.
I don't
With
like
me,
working
it's the
from home,
leaving
but
house. I like to dress
yeah,
up in a costume for every book I do, so I can I like to do that, right? So I can feel the
totally.
part. You can't
But
really do that living
I
in
tell
the
you,
UK where they're conservative going
of
to
course, right, of
a
course. Yeah,
studio.
I'm gonna show up like looking like a buccaneer today. Um, but uh I used to do the same thing. What I would do is I would go to PRH. Um, um, Dan Musselman is one of my dearest friends, one of the best people I've ever known in my life, and he's the producer here in Los Angeles. And I would bring props with me. I would bring toys with me, action figures, just to kind of give me this idea. Okay, this book is about two brothers trying to kill one
Yeah,
another, and so
it's
I
the
got like these.
mood.
Right. I got these two action
Yeah,
figures and they both had guns and they were aiming at each other. And I'm like, okay, well, I can I can I can I can set that mood for myself at somebody else's studio. But
yeah.
when lockdown happened, I bought a studio brick. And I changed from my old studio, which I always hated.
Oh,
It was the room underneath my stairs. It was I basically, it wasn't even like a closet, but I turned it into a closet and put a microphone in there. It was my Harry Potter booth. It was ridiculous, and I really did not enjoy my time in there. But during lockdown, I bought this, and you can't see it, but I invested so much time and money. I have a baker's rack that I bought custom made, that would fit here in my studio, so that I have shelves. Boom, 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 and I have all the Marlowe books. I have all my diabetic, medical
so
supplies.
it's your
I have the food.
sanctuary.
It's my sanctuary.
Yeah.
But the biggest shelf, and you can't see it because it's right above my monitor. Biggest shelf is like 18 inches tall, and I put a bunch of Christmas decorations in it. Just
Oh, I
because,
see.
yeah, just because, you know what? It makes me happy.
They have a Christmas store in Fresno and in London, I have to
In
say.
in Fresno and in London. Yes, I've been to the London one. I've
They
been to the
had one
London
in
one. Yes.
Fresno in Fig Garden Village. I suspect it's gone now, but
Mm,
it was my favorite thing. I never understood why you had to wait till that time of the year.
why? Why would? And what's really funny is Hillary Huber. And if anybody in the audience has not heard a book that Hillary Huber has done, she is magnificent. Hillary Huber's voice is deeper than mine.
Yeah, we've had
She
her
has
as a guest.
Have you? Okay.
She is like the
She is
Oprah of audiobooks. We love Hillary.
she has told me that it is harder for her to do women's voices than to do men's voices,
Yeah.
because her voice is so deep. But she and I give each other just a ration of shit every year, because she's like, I love Christmas. I just don't love it until the day after Thanksgiving. And
No, I
so
don't really get that rule.
I don't get that either. And so usually, like on Facebook, what I'll do is post on her page. I have this meme of this little tiny kid, like 2 years old, and he's like, he's like doing this, and the text says, I'm gonna start listening to Christmas music.
We
And
we
so
we
I'll
did a
I'll
we did a
post it on
Cup
her
of
page like
Joe.
in June.
We did an old variety show, Christmas variety show for Cup of Joe last year, and we're
Did
going to do
you
one this year as
really?
well. So think about it if you've got that, because the thing is,
Oh gosh.
you'd be surprised. I couldn't believe how many narrators obviously did the school Christmas show, because the acts that came in were
Oh yeah.
brilliant. It was like so much fun. It was more fun than you should be allowed to have.
there's a voiceover workout group that meets not far from my house. But most of them are people who do commercials and promos
Yeah.
and live
The
announcing.
grown-ups.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. I am the only audiobook guy there. But every year they have a Christmas party. They weren't obviously able to do that this year.
Yeah.
But what they do is everybody comes in and they just hand them a piece of blind copy, and they do like a Christmas commercial, right? And so they go in the booth, and it's just a lot of fun. It's like, hey, you get to see how your contemporaries work their craft, right? How a promo person will treat Christmas. Every single year, they've given me the exact same copy. It's the Gift of the Magi by O. Henry. And it's just become a tradition. And every year they're like, this is for you, because it's like 3 or 4 minutes long reading the whole story, you know? And
But
so I'm like, okay, you give it to the audiobook guy. And
the tradition is good, though. It's what you said
it's
about
marvelous.
religion. It's ritual. And I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
it
it
like
is.
times like that when things get dark, that's what I
Yeah.
love. This I'm obnoxious. Pumpkin spice latte, me in the fall with the leaves. We're talking Pinterest. I don't
I
care. It's
saw
ritual.
pumpkin spice coffee in my supermarket 2 days ago, and I thought, yes.
Yes. And the good thing about this job is we're doing books of Christmas books
Oh no.
starting like September, August. So we're
All
really
right.
obnoxious running around.
Totally. I'm telling seriously, I on my phone, it's charging right here in front of me. I have got 3 books that were written about how Christmas carols, the stories of individual Christmas carols, how they were written. And I start listening to it around September of every year. Yes, you know, Mark Cashman narrated 2 of them. And it's so funny because he's Jewish. And so I remind him, I'm like, hey, remember those Christmas books you did? He goes, yes. And I listen to those every year. And I listen to the story about, Oh Holy Night. And then I listen to Oh Holy Night. I switch between apps on my phone, the Audible app, and then my iPhone's
Does it remind
iTunes
you of
app.
when you were little? Because I think also it's memories. This time of year, I think, don't we have to fight loneliness? Everyone, no matter who you are this time of year.
Well, I'll tell you,
Remembering.
I don't know how many people in the audience will, I'm assuming everybody's going to be able to understand this, but I know, having had a brain tumor, in 2012, when I was diagnosed with cancer, I went to New York and did a clinical trial for 6 months. I got there in
Wow.
August, and I flew home 4 days before. I flew home on December 20th. December 21st, I had already bought a plane ticket to Australia. My partner at the time, Tess, that's where her family, that's where she's from. And so I had 36 hours at home between arriving from New York and going to Australia. And there wasn't a freaking moment to hang a single Christmas decoration. But as I was finishing up my time in New York, right around a little bit before Thanksgiving, they start dressing up. They start wrapping up the city in Christmas decorations. And I went to the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. I went to the Christmas show at with the Rockettes, and I remember thinking, I'm not going to be able to put up Christmas decorations. And you can't help it when you hear that the C word. It's like,
Yeah,
how
the
many more of
fear.
these do I get? And I told myself, I can't do anything. Of course, when we went to Australia, it's 120
I
degrees. They're
know.
in a different
I would
hemisphere.
find that a bit
It's summer for
depressing.
them. But I knew that. And I
Yeah.
said, when I'm home and I'm able, I will never deny myself a moment of the joy that Christmas brings me. And that's and people saw him advance. He came over to my house one time. It was March. He came over. He was on his way to an acting class, and we had like a glass of bourbon beforehand. And he said, "Scott, it's March. Come on." And I said, "Well, here's the thing. It's my fucking house." You know,
and you go straight to the feeling. The feeling is what matters. That's what Christmas is.
Yeah.
And the lights are us being strong.
Means something. It means something different to me than it does to Simon and to Hillary and to anybody else. And I'm like, that's okay. This is my love language. I decided that 9 years ago in 2012. And it feeds me, especially now here in my booth. For all of those of you at home, make your booth as joyful as you can. You're going to spend a third of your life there. And in the same way that when you buy a bed, buy a really good one, because you're going to spend a third of your life there.
But you're looking at the elements of your life, and you're asking yourself how invested you're. I had a pet, a bird, and if anyone knows, birds are like this big, and everyone's like, "Oh God, here she goes again." But it passed away 2 months ago, and I was bereft. And there was a point where I thought, and then I got a new one, and there was all the drama. And there was a point in this online world where I thought, even an objective person might think I'm a little bit nuts being this dramatic about this. But love is love. And I had
them.
I'm like, yes, I feel overly dramatic about little things, but you choose. Am I going to be a person that could be heartbroken over the death of a goldfish? Or am I going to be a person that doesn't even notice or care? And whichever way you choose, that's fine. We all choose. But I think I'd rather the high drama and the pain and the crazy. It's what you said, the mess of life.
Life is a mess, but it is a glorious mess.
Yeah.
Yeah. My dog, Cookie, she passed away a number of years ago. She was a Westie. And in my old studio, in my current studio, I have a big glass door. I can see through the whole thing, all the way down to the floor. In my old studio, I only had about this much room where I could see through the door, and it was at my eye height, so I couldn't see anything down below it. And Cookie would come downstairs, and she had just kind of grown accustomed to me being in the booth. And I was under the stairs, of course, so when I would hear ka-thump, 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 she was walking down, and I'd be like, okay. I stop recording, and I wait until I hear the sound of her collar, her metal collar hitting the metal bar at the bottom of the doggy door. And I hear this ka-chink, and then she'd spend 5, 10, 20 minutes out there. And then I would hear the ka-chink of her coming inside, and I would wait a long time. And I'd be like, what? Why isn't she going upstairs? Because I'm going to have to stop again when she goes up the stairs, because, soundproofing, it's no booth is soundproof. And I was like, okay. I hired a dear friend of mine to engineer for me on a very difficult week. I was so pressed for time. A buddy of mine, also Australian, a buddy that I met through Tess. His name is Kitch, and he's an audiobook editor now for PRH. And so I'd warned him. I'm like, when she comes inside, we just have to wait for her to go upstairs. And there's this long pause while we're waiting, and he gets really close to the mic and he says, she's outside of the booth waiting for you, right? And I said, what? And I never knew. All those times when it took a long time for the reason it took a long time for her to go up the stairs was because
she was waiting for you.
It took her as long as it took for her to get disappointed that I wasn't coming out.
Oh.
And I tell you what, from that point on, when he told me that, I threw the door open and I picked her up and I held her in my arms. And from that point on, every single time for the rest of her life, which was about another 3-4 years, every single time she came over and I lifted her up and I held her in my lap. I just gave her some love. And I'm like, look, I don't have kids. This is how I choose to express my love.
And I don't either. And I don't, yeah, and I don't. I'm not that person. And but
I
the
just tried to
connection
make
with
up for
an
lost time, you know?
well, the connection with an animal it's an honor. It's just an
Yeah,
honor.
yeah.
It really is an honor. And people discount smaller animals like they're nothing. But I mean, can your dog talk in a Scottish accent? Sorry. You know what I mean?
And if they can, hire them.
Exactly. Yeah, no, I love that. But I think we're picking our audience because there's not one narrator that doesn't get
Mm.
it, because the nature of our job, doesn't it? I think this job makes us better people because we've seen it
I
all.
think it does.
You know,
I
we realize how
completely
few
agree.
morals we have once we start this job, the amount of things we would narrate. So, and guys, don't forget, get your quirky questions in. If anyone's got any questions about his favorite socks or anything, throw them here, because you know what I'm going to pin Scott with in a minute. The ultimate question that the guests don't know. But I just want to ask. Okay, so I'm going to ask you now, because
Do
in
it.
case.
Do it.
So, as you know, we're recording the call. It's going to be
Yeah.
on YouTube for like 60,
Mhm.
70, probably outlast the climate. What would you like to leave the audience with that's going to be watching this in the next 60 years that you think just gets to the heart of what you want them to know? Final words of wisdom, most
What I
important
want them to
message,
know about
anything, anything in the world.
narration, or
If you were like having a conversation with someone and you wanted to tell them the most important thing, what would you tell them?
um, hmm, hmm. I would want them to understand that we te we tend to arbitrarily create a division between work and life. George Burns always said, if you do what you love every day of your life, you've never gone to work, you know.
Mhm.
And he never retired until he was 99 and a half years old. And he broke his hip, and then he lived to be 100 and a half years old. Um, Edgar Bergen, he donated Charlie McCarthy to the Smithsonian Institute on the date of his retirement, and he died 2 days later. I took that lesson in the late 70s when it happened. There's a lot of crossover between your work and your love, your passion. I think it's important to realize that sometimes you shouldn't make that line so strictly demarcated. For years, whenever I was working on on a bad book, and I'm not mentioning any names, because of course there are no bad books.
A book that wasn't for you
Yes,
necessarily.
I am a book fan like everybody else.
Yes.
I was working on a series that was just wretched. And every time I would work on one, I would say to somebody just flippantly, on my deathbed, I'm not going to wish I had done one more audiobook.
Yeah.
Again, I'm in a different position. I've done 1,000 of them by now. And so it's like, okay, maybe not everybody was in the kind of headspace they assume I was in when I would say that. But what I meant was, I won't wish I had done one more bad book on audio. And on August 9th of 2012, I got diagnosed with cancer. And I had 2 years previously done the book, The Passage by Justin Cronin. And it's a post-apocalyptic vampire novel that don't judge it according to its genre, because it's one of the most, the writing was just lovely, and it broke my heart so often. There were so many times where I had to stop so I could just weep and
Wow.
recover. And for 2 years, Christina Rooney and I at PRH, we were looking forward to the next installment in the trilogy. And it was Monday on the 9th, and I was supposed to start the second book in the trilogy on Friday. And it was on Monday when I found out that I had cancer. And I went in and I told Tess the news. And then the very first phone call I made was to PRH. And I said, so yeah, life took a side turn, and I'm going to have to go to New York and do this clinical trial. We had found that out like within an hour of me getting diagnosed. And I hadn't even called my parents yet. And I love my parents. But I knew that I had to start this book in 4 days. It was Monday, we had to start on Friday, and we were going to work Friday, Saturday, Sunday for like 12 days straight. And I called them and I said, can we do it in New York? Is there a studio in New York where we can do this? Because
wow.
And I flew out on, this was Monday, and I flew out on Thursday. I packed up and I moved to New York 3 days later. And I remember thinking, I haven't even called my mom yet and told her the news. Is this crazy? Am I focusing too much on work? And I was reminded of all those times when I said on my deathbed, I won't wish that I had done one more audiobook. And I thought long and hard about this series. And I said, on my deathbed, I would have regretted not doing this series.
Right.
And doing books
I'm
2
glad
and 3.
you said that, because you can't separate. You love your work. You love everything you do.
Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. But I had to understand at that moment. And I did the job. And I remember I was in New York and I was so tired. These treatments were so awful. There was a time where I said, because I would have to wake up and I would go to Random House. It was before the merger. I would go to Random House, which was right across from the David Letterman studio, and I would record there. And then in the middle of the day, I would have to take a subway down to the Wall Street district, and then I would have to take a subway back after getting the treatment, and I would stay there until 7 or 8 p.m. And I was so tired, and I couldn't have like a Diet Coke. I couldn't have caffeine, because of the treatment. And I said to the director, could you just give me 20 minutes, please? I just need to sleep. And he said, well, yeah, but where would you do that? And I said,
were they aware of the circumstance?
Yeah, no, okay. They knew. And I said, I'll just do it right here. And they said, we don't even have a couch in the control booth. Where are you going to sleep? And I said, I don't care. And I pushed the chair out of the way and I just laid down on the ground and I curled up into a fetal position. And I just slept for 20 minutes.
Wow.
And they're freaking out going, well, what do we need to do for him? They're calling Los Angeles, where I typically where I usually work. And they're like, is this the diabetes who's making him act like this? Is this the cancer? How do we support him? They could have fired me so easily. It would have been so much easier for them to replace me. I was so late.
But they wouldn't. They're human beings.
They did it. They let me finish it. And it was 3 years after that. So this was in 2015. It took the author 3 years to write the final version, The City of Glass. And the day that we started, we were here in LA, and we started, and I just started sobbing. And I thought, can't believe I still get to do this book. I can't believe I still get to work on this series. And again, it's that combination of, what do you do? What do you love? There's a Venn diagram where those are going to overlap. And when they do whatever you can to make that happen. That would be the advice. Very long answer to a very short question that you asked, but that would be my advice. Do whatever you can to make that happen.
Yeah.
Because it can be life-changing. And I tell you what, I went and saw the author in New York. He started his book tour in New York on book 2 when I was still there in the clinical trial. And he's like, "What are you doing here?" He's like, "I usually see you in the LA bookstore." And I said, "Well, and he kept pushing. He's like, "No, why are you here?" And I was like, "Well, health reasons." "Oh, what's wrong?" And I said, "Well, I found out that I had cancer." And he said, "So did I." And while he was working on book 2,
Wow.
he was dealing
The
with what
gods of
I was.
art.
Yeah.
Something had to
Yeah.
be created. The plant, I really believe that. And I believe it's the same thing we've been saying through the
Completely.
whole call. The Christmas lights, keeping people up, the helping people with the panic attack, the following the art. It's living, it's listening to your heart. It's my bird. It's your dog. It's what's important in your heart to you. And we all know it, every single one of us. And you got to hold on to it and follow it and grab it. And it might not look like other people expect. It might not. It might be Christmas in March, but it might be. But
it will be. If we were upstairs I tried to get this call started when I was upstairs in my office, and I still have a tree up. I keep it up year round because it's where
you
Cookie
should do the
used to.
variety show this year. Johnny did it
Oh
last year.
God! Oh, that'd
Johnny
be
was
so much.
brilliant.
I would absolutely adore that.
Yep, I'll
Yeah.
let you know when we open the doors. So this has been, oh, and let me just be cheeky and throw, we did have 1 or 2 questions.
I've got as much time as you need, so ask away, whatever you wish.
Okay. Question: how long are you keeping the beard? By James.
Okay, just FYI, I had the beard out to like here. I had, I was aiming for like the Papa Hemingway look. I wound up with like the Unabomber look. And I finally said to Suzanne, "Fuck this, I just can't deal with this anymore." And so I trimmed it here on the sides, and I've had this for 20 years, so I ain't getting rid of it.
Yeah, I thought you always had a beard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Even there were times when I would just keep it at like, Miami Vice stubble level. But I've never been without facial hair for the last 25 years of my life. So it'll
Okay.
probably stay around this level.
So now we've got,
But look at this hair. I mean, Jesus, really? Seriously. It's like this is COVID hair.
that's
And
LA cool.
well, bless you for saying so. I'm keeping it at least until we have a couple of dear friends that are getting married, and when we go to the wedding, Suzanne is in the wedding, is in the wedding party. I might trim the hair before then, but not this. This is me. I'm keeping this.
I like it. I think it's a good sartorial choice.
Bless
now,
you.
Nancy wants to know, what is your favorite silent film and bourbon?
Oh gosh. Oh my gosh. I tell you what, if I could watch The Great Gatsby, it's lost. It doesn't exist anymore, but the preview exists. And yeah, if I could watch that, that might be my favorite silent film, but because F. Scott Fitzgerald and his wife Zelda actually came to the premiere of that one, I would have to say my favorite silent film is Sherlock Jr. I think it's Buster Keaton's best film. It's only about 45 minutes long. It barely qualifies as a feature. It's kind of bridges the gap between a two-reeler and a feature. But in it, he is a film projectionist who is in love with a woman and also dreams of being a detective. and he falls asleep while watching the film, and his dream self gets up out of the projectionist seat and walks through the screen
Oh,
into the
wow.
film
I've
and
never seen that.
helps solve the crime um
I'd
that
love that.
occurs.
I've never seen
it's
that.
it's brilliant.
What's it
It's
called again?
absolutely Sherlock Jr.
Sherlock Jr. I might need
And
to
a
see
and a
that.
very close second would be City Lights, which is Chaplin's masterpiece. I knew Sidney Chaplin, Charlie's eldest surviving son.
Wow.
Charlie Jr. died at the age of 40, I want to say, but Sidney, who is named after Charlie's brother, he died in his 80s, and I knew him. He told me a lot of stories about his dad, and stories about City Lights. The last moment of City Lights, when he has a rose and he's biting the stem and holding the rose on the side of his mouth because he's so embarrassed. It's one of the most beautiful moments on film ever created. So yes,
I might need to start
those would be.
binging
Oh, they're
silent
so good.
films.
They're so good. Oh my God, they're good.
And you know they're good. There's so many old films that you know, or even ones that you've already seen, and then you just don't watch them and you watch rubbish. You put the TV on and it's just like,
You know
why
what?
am I watching this? What is it I'm watching? Who are you?
Only about 20% of all silent films ever made still exist. And when I find myself watching, I love baking shows, Great British baking shows,
Yeah.
and Top Chef, and whatever. But as I'm watching them, I think there's that 20%, and I'm not watching them.
Yeah.
Shouldn't I be?
And it could change, and it would instantly change your mood. It's like music. I know that
Oh
certain
yeah,
music would instantly change my mood, but
yeah.
yet I will watch the worst rubbish on
Um,
TV.
Douglas Fairbanks Sr., who was famous for playing D'Artagnan in The Three Musketeers and for playing Zorro um, um, and for the Thief of Baghdad. He
That
made
strong male
spectacles.
protagonist.
Yes, exactly. He invented the blockbuster, the Hollywood blockbuster, and he thrived while silent films existed, and then he dwindled when they
I
didn't.
had noise in my end. Somebody drove by. So could you repeat that? Because I'm afraid it might
Well,
have cut you off.
he thrived as a silent film star, as a swashbuckler, as an action adventure star during the silent era. But when the sound era came in, his career dwindled, and he got a divorce soon thereafter from Mary Pickford. They were the most famous couple in the world. Their house was called Pickfair.
I love Mary Pickford, by the way.
Oh God, yes. And he literally died of a broken heart. Very soon into the sound era, I want to say 1936, 38, he had passed away. There's an amazing story. They were working on his last silent film, and they were shooting at the very first studio where I ever appeared in a film. I was in Robin Hood Men in Tights, and it was at Warner Hollywood on Santa Monica Boulevard near the Formosa Cafe.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, and I lived walking distance away, so I was like, I could walk to work. It
Yeah.
was absolutely amazing. That's where the original United Artists studio was. That's where Douglas Fairbanks was shooting his last silent film, which I believe was The Man in the Iron Mask. And it was the last time he ever played D'Artagnan. And he heard that they were wiring it for sound. And the thing that nobody realizes about silent pictures was that they were never silent. They would have orchestras there, or at least a 3 or 4 piece band who would be there playing piano and violin, and they would be doing mood music for the actors to get them into the mood that the emotional mood they needed to be in. And he heard they were wiring one of the silent studios into sound, And he said to his producer, let's go down and see what's going on. And he took his arm. He took his arm like, you know, a old movie man escorting a woman. He would just wrap his arm. You know, that's the way he always did it. He did that with people. He was like, walk with me, off we go. And they went down to the studio, and they found it rather than being this harmonious place where people were doing wonderful work, it was filled with these, you know, faceless drones who were running around stressed out of their minds, miles and miles of cable. And the mood had very obviously switched from joy to stress, because the industry had changed. You needed to have sound from this point on. And Doug turned to his producer and he said, the romance of movie making ends here.
Oh, that's
I'm telling you, I read that and I start crying.
But it's still in LA. It's still in, but that's the thing. It's tangible. It is in the air in LA.
It is absolutely.
You are living in it every day. And it doesn't matter. We used to laugh. Earthquakes, riots. I mean, hit us with it, because we get out of the house and it's like we're there.
A number of times over the years, people have asked me, partners, girlfriends, would you consider living anyplace else? And I'm like, I would consider it. It would just be really hard.
Yeah, I moved to London, but LA's, if it's your home, it's your home.
Yeah.
And you can't explain to people why you love it, because they see it as an ugly, but you love the ugly freeways.
Yeah.
Because it's your home.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Mike, that was a lovely moment. Mike Carnes, I believe your name is. I just saw your daughter come up and jump into your lap. That makes me happy.
That's probably Mike. Did he have the cigar in his hand?
Yes, he is the cigar smoker. Yes, the big bearded fellow. I was right there with you. It was like out to here like a month ago, and I finally said, I gotta go.
I love that. Oh, you never said what favorite bourbon.
Okay. Well, my typical bourbon is Bullet with 2 T's, Bullet bourbon. But if they have it, not every bar has it. Always Woodford Reserve bourbon. Stacy, yes, Stacy Caroline, I see your, you know, rock on sign. When I had my 20th anniversary in audiobooks, which was on June 10th.
Did you celebrate it?
Of 2019. Yes, Suzanne and I had only been dating for about 4 months at that time. And she said, would it be presumptuous if I threw you a party? And I was like, hell no. It was my 20th anniversary in audiobooks. And so she invited a bunch of friends and colleagues over, and
I think that's important, marking milestones. We talked about that on these calls before.
Well, it is. She and I had another milestone maybe a year ago. I did my 1000th audiobook, and she got into the industry far later than me, but she had done her 250th. And I was like, that calls for a celebration. And we couldn't do it with other people. It was during, you know, COVID. It was during lockdown. But we did it on Zoom. We had a marvelous dinner, wonderful bottle of champagne, and you have to celebrate the milestone.
I think it's lovely.
But,
I do. I think it's lovely.
But during that party, we bought a couple of huge bottles of Woodford Reserve, and we brought a bartender over, and he mixed old fashions for everybody. And she's very crafty. She makes handmade cards and invitations, and, you know, thank you cards and whatnot. And she made the invitations, and she said, you were invited to celebrate an old-fashioned boy. And so it was like, well, of course, the old fashioned has to be the drink of choice. And our bartender made it all night. So
Are you looking forward to kind of, you see, I still don't feel like the whole quarantine thing's over, although the rest of the world
no,
seems to think they can just, personally, I'm happy with Zoom. I quite enjoy Zoom.
no,
But
I know what you mean.
are you missing it? Are you,
We have gotten together with vaccinated friends, and I'm not here to shame anybody who isn't vaccinated, but the fact of the matter is, I'm gonna hang out with you. I can't. I'm high
yeah,
risk. I can't do it.
yeah.
Um, so not to point fingers, but we were like, hey, Vikas Adam, you know, hey, my buddy Michael Tuppy, hey, Rachel Jacobs, we would reach out and say, bring your partners. Are you vaccinated? If so, let's go to Musso and Frank. First time we did that, it was with Joe Cipriano, the ultimate promo guy, the voice
Oh
you
my God,
always
I'm
hear.
Musso and Frank's now. You keep
Oh
Musso
yeah.
and Frank's
Oh
or El
God.
Coyote. I'd kill, or Trader
Oh my
Joe's.
God. El Coyote. Jesus.
Sharon Tate had
That's
her last meal at El
last meal
Coyote.
there. It was our last meal.
I'd
I
kill to
did
go back to El Coyote.
yeah, I did Helter Skelter and found that out while recording it here at the house.
Wow.
Um
Wow. Yeah. Did you go there just to
yeah.
get into the
Well,
moment?
yeah, and it's very interesting when you're working on like a true crime thing. You don't want to you don't want to be gratuitous.
Mm,
I don't want to get
exactly.
caught up in the fan experience. Um, but I do want to pay my respects.
Yeah.
So
Good
I,
point.
I try to keep that in mind when I go to a place like that.
You
But
know that what one of the first books I read was the Charles Manson. I got into my parents' library. Evidently, I wasn't supposed to know, and I read the Marquis de Sade. I remember Charles Manson, and the Charles Manson was more shocking than Marquis de Sade, actually,
oh,
and
sure,
Wuthering
yeah.
Heights way too many times. But
Hmm.
but you do need to. I guess you do need to. I don't think I've narrated any true crime. Have you done a lot of it?
A handful. Yeah, I did Helter Skelter. I did Devil in the White City by Eric Larson, which is about the world's first serial killer. He
Ooh,
was operating before Jack the Ripper, but he wasn't discovered until afterward. So most people don't know about him. He was working in Chicago. And he was preying off the victims of the 1893 Chicago World's Fair. Um, so yeah, I've worked on a number of, I should say a handful,
I want to do
true
true crime.
crime.
I've never even actually thought of it. Um,
I work on occasionally I work on true crime. Occasionally I get to do books. I honestly, I don't do anywhere near enough nonfiction. But actually, this has nothing to do with crime, but I actually just did, oops,
I'm not looking like I'm going to be able to see your book.
I just did this one, The Making of Casablanca,
Oh,
which if you've been listening for the last hour, you know how much that must mean to me.
yeah,
I
that's
had,
that's what Hancock Park reminded me of, and I don't know why, but when you'd walk through Hancock Park in the evenings and they'd have their windows open, and all those old, the really wealthy, in
yeah,
the neighborhood, and it always seemed always like a Humphrey Bogart, Lauren Bacall, that
totally.
just they
I've
still
got,
decorated like that.
I have photos of Bogart and Bacall all over my booth. Um, they're outside my booth. They're inside my booth. Um, uh, yeah, I tried to make that book happen on audio for 5 years, The Making of Casablanca, and then I just, due to various life circumstances, wasn't able to get it going. And then Oasis Audio got in touch and said, hey, we just got the rights to this book. I hear you've been interested in doing it. Do you want to narrate it for us? And I was like,
The art
yes.
gods.
Yeah. And
Yep.
I was working on it The original title was Round Up the Usual Suspects, the best line from the film. And I was working on it during the aftermath of the George Floyd murder.
Oh.
And so much discussion was ongoing at the time in the voiceover world about inclusion and representation. And as I was narrating it, I was halfway through the book, and we got to the chapter that described the scene where they sing the Marseillaise, where, the Nazis are singing, Deutschland über alles. And Victor Laszlo, he and Rick are upstairs in Rick's office, and they hear this, and he goes downstairs and he charges up to the band and he says, the Marseillaise, play it. And every time I watch that, I cry. And just because, it's expert storytelling. But you ask yourself, why do you cry?
I cried through the whole movie.
The reason why you cry during that scene,
yeah,
everybody in it was a Jewish refugee from Europe. The book,
yeah.
the movie has nothing to do with Judaism. It doesn't even mention Judaism. But the fact of the matter is, the director was a Hungarian Jew who fled the Nazis. The two Oscar-winning playwrights were Jewish. Screenwriters were Jewish. God, the assistant director, the owner of the studio, Jack Warner, was Jewish. It's Jewish men telling this story. Now, I'm reading a book written by a Jewish woman, writing about Jewish men, and she interviewed a guy, Dan Seymour, who played the bouncer at Rick's at the door. He was the doorman. He would either let people in or not. And he said, when they called cut, I realized, he says, all I could hear was sobbing. And I turned around and I looked into the room, Rick's Cafe, and realized everybody here is Jewish and how much this must mean to them. And at that point, I reached out to the publisher and I said, I'm not going to read this whole thing. And I broke down the parts of Jack Warner and the producer, Hal Wallace, both of them Jewish men. And I reached out to three friends of mine, Chris Tabori and Jason Culp and Rob Shapiro. And two of those three, well, Chris Tabori, he's actually related to the producer of the film.
You honored the story.
Well, I was like, this is a book written by a Jewish woman about Jewish men telling a story that doesn't have anything really to do with Judaism. And yet that scene, I was like, I can't do this. And I reached out to them and I had them read all of the lines of dialogue that these men, these filmmakers uttered. And I just felt proud about that.
Yeah, you should. But you know what you made me realize? I always thought that the reason I loved all the old Hollywood was because of the innocence. But it's a very good point, because my favorite, like Cabaret, and I mean, just the movies, the things that inform my life.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't the innocence that made it special. It was the life that was going on around them. They weren't having easy times. I mean, these were, wars and McCarthy. I mean, there was heavy stuff. It wasn't the innocence. It was,
how do you maneuver through this misery? That is really what makes it special.
Never thought of it that way.
Yeah.
Scott Brick. Wonderful. Thank you. This was a fabulous call.
I'm so glad there's so many of you still here. I'm grateful.
I'm going to print the chat for you in the end.
Oh, I would love to. I was just going to say, I would love to read the chat. I just haven't.
So many
my
people.
Microphone is right in the way.
Yeah, I'm
but I would love to
print it.
I would love to read that. It means a lot to me that you all are here. So thank you.
Let me just see. I can. Oh, well, it sends me a copy of the chat in the end. So, hold on one second. I don't want to lose it. Okay, it sends me a copy in the end. She says, fingers crossed. and I'll send it to you. Thank you so much. And
This has been fun. This has been a
I'll let
lot
you
of
know
fun.
when we have our variety show coming up.
Please
Johnny
do.
did
Oh my
say that you
gosh.
would be an amazing guest, and Johnny is never wrong. I'm
I'll
like
tell you,
such a fan of Johnny. I'm like stalker level at this
I'm
point. So
telling
yeah.
you. Yeah, me too. I'll never tell him that. And yet,
Oh, I tell him.
yeah,
I think I keep sending him and Joanna messages going, oh my God, you changed my life. You're the smartest people. They might think I'm a little bit too key.
Johnny is my brother from another mother.
They're found. And on that note, should I send Suzanne an email? I'm dying to have Suzanne as a guest.
Oh my gosh, she would love that. She would absolutely love that.
Cool. Because I don't know her very well, but she's
her
so
email?
cool.
If not, I'll send it to you.
I think I do from the APA webinar thing in Majiki.
Okay. When we get off, I will send you her email.
Tell her that.
Yes, and she mentions it during the APA webcast all the time.
Yes, and then
just FYI, when you talk about it, webcast rather than webinar.
Webcast. Okay, got it.
Webinar is a dirty word on that show.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
And also, if I'm really cheeky, I have ulterior motives because we have the power couple thing. We've had Sean and Anna. We've had Johnny and Joanna.
Oh, sure.
Someday we could do Suzanne and Scott.
Oh, that'd be fun. Of course. Yeah, okay. Happy to.
You guys, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for joining us, everybody. I'm grateful.
It's been fabulous, and thank you so much, Scott. It's been life affirming.
I'm grateful. Thank you.
Bye, everyone. And the video will be out in about 2 weeks. Within about 2 weeks, I'll let you know. Bye, everyone.
It's great to see you all. It's great to see you all. Thank you. Thank you.
Rhythm song. Come on, everybody, tap along. First you scrub a dub, then you tap and rub. You might have to yell when you hear the bell ring out loud and long. Oh.